Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chant, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Thursday, April 27th, 2023. And if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can always go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to the map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left, with also information available for American Samoa, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And if you point and click on these maps, it'll pull up a forecast for any location in the country, along with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories. Quick check, we have severe thunderstorm watch out for parts of South Georgia and Florida, flood watches for areas around western Lake Superior, the Arrowhead region of Minnesota. Flood watches also in effect across Nevada, especially for snowmelt flooding there in the mountains, as temperatures are going to be warm across Nevada there in the 70s to even near 80 degrees in the days ahead. Here in Alaska, some intermittent rain and snow will be possible along the Gulf Coast and Panhandle now through early next week. It will not be raining all of the time, but it's certainly the result of milder air being pulled in across the region on a southerly flow aloft. Warming temperatures over the Panhandle this weekend, well into the 50s, even some 60 to 65 degree readings are possible come Saturday afternoon. And we'll see milder temperatures warming closer to normal values across the interior. At Fairbanks and Eagle could be up near 50 this weekend. Nevertheless, below normal temperatures are expected to continue across much of the mainland through early May, which will delay the heavier snowmelt and the initial river breakup. Looking at one of the FAA webcams here in the far north, Gamble on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, some light snow and blowing snow, temperature at 18 degrees. Winds there this afternoon have been gusting upwards around 40 miles an hour out of the northeast and north. There is the core of some late season Arctic air that's worked its way from the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, now heading to the west and southwest of St. Lawrence and St. Matthew out into the central Bering, where that Arctic air will modify over the course of the weekend. Meanwhile, milder air is coming up from the south along the British Columbia coast and out over the North Pacific up into the Gulf. Cake right now has cloudy skies, some sprinkles, 40 degrees, but readings across the Panhandle will be in the 50s and 60s as we get into Saturday. No significant watches, warnings, or advisories are currently in effect for any of the mainland or areas of the southeast or extending out into the Alaska Peninsula. Relatively quiet weather, as would be expected for this time of year. We do have a moisture feed coming in up off the North Pacific associated with a front, a weakening area of low pressure in the northwest Panhandle. So areas of the Panhandle there seeing rain and snow mainly confined to the higher elevations, the coastal mountains. Back to the west, colder air is pulled down through the Bering Strait and is working its way southwest of St. Lawrence Island. And we do expect the low that's currently located over the northwestern Gulf, that feature will weaken as we go into the overnight and early on Friday. Still a weak area low pressure back along the southwest coast as well. So late tonight into Friday morning, we see the next area of low pressure down along the lower portion of your screen coming up from the North Pacific, heading toward the Gulf. That's going to pull warmer air northward along the western coastline there of Canada up into the Panhandle by Saturday. There will be another low come up out of the North Pacific and move just south of the central Aleutians as we go into Sunday. So looking at the map Friday afternoon, you see that one low with more rain along areas, especially the northeastern and north central Gulf Coast. And by the time we get into Saturday, that one just kind of takes place of the current one there in the northwest corner of the Gulf as we get a push of milder air that works up through the panhandle. Expect some periods of sunshine developing there on Saturday with a small chance of some isolated showers. A little stronger low will ride up along the eastern Aleutians and up toward Bristol Bay Sunday into later Monday. Temperatures, well, generally above freezing here across the panhandle for Friday morning. We could still see some readings in the single digits above or below zero along areas of the North Slope and Arctic coast. And for Friday afternoon, we'll get temperatures, some 50s showing up in through the panhandle, mid-40s, upper 40s even along areas of the Tanana Valley, including Fairbanks. There could be up 49 to near 50. Saturday morning lows will be above freezing throughout the panhandle and generally south of Anchorage and along areas of south central. Still some areas a little above or below zero there along the Arctic coast, but the extent of that Arctic air is not nearly as widespread as it has been here over the past few weeks. And Saturday afternoon, look at those temperatures there in the panhandle. With any sun, you're going to see readings break the 60-degree mark from north to south. So it'll be a mild afternoon on Saturday across the panhandle, and even some isolated near 50-degree readings at Talkeetna on up through Fairbanks and Eagle for Saturday afternoon. Quick check of the 6 to 10-day temperature outlook, May 3rd through the 7th. Stubborn forecast, still below normal temperatures anticipated, centered over south central areas surrounding Cook Inlet, the west side of the Alaska Range. So that's just going to further delay the more significant or heavier snowmelt runoff, which will in turn delay the river breakup. Precipitation-wise, precipitation could average a bit above normal across much of the mainland, centered more on the middle Yukon Valley, all the way up through the Brooks Range, and then there along areas of the Arctic coast. So a continuation of cooler than normal temperatures are anticipated here for early April or May.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look now at your aviation weather. If you have a flight planned Friday or on Saturday, we're going to be watching a couple areas of low pressure, one lifting out of the North Pacific up into the Gulf and weakening as we go through Friday, early Saturday. There'll be another stronger low down around 978 millibars past just south of the central Aleutians and crossing through the eastern Aleutians on Sunday. In the meantime, we do have areas of IFR early Friday morning along portions of the Panhandle, back along especially the intercoastal mountains of the north central Gulf, areas of the southwest along Bristol Bay and the lower Yukon, Kuskokwim basins, as well as up along the spine of the Brooks Range. By Friday afternoon, conditions do improve a bit to MVFR across the far north Slope Brooks Range. Still areas of IFR, far northern Panhandle, Wrangell, St. Elias Mountains, and down across a good portion of the southeastern Gulf. And for Saturday morning, IFR conditions are still in place over areas of the Gulf up into around Yakutat Bay. We also have IFR conditions, central Brooks Range and up along the Arctic coast, back through the lower Chukchi Sea, along the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence, down through the lower Yukon Delta. And for Saturday afternoon, conditions do improve in the north, lifting back to MVFR or VFR. IFR, though, will persist across areas of the southeast, especially along the northeastern Gulf Coast, up into Yakutat Bay, down in the southeastern portion of the Gulf, and then from Nunavik Island southwestward into the central Aleutians. Pass conditions on Friday, Anatuvik Pass will be MVFR, though IFR conditions will be lurking along the north slope once you pass the north entrance. Again, the same thing, MVFR conditions expected on Friday, though IFR conditions will exist especially early in the day along areas of the north slope north of the north entrance. Along the Alaska Range, the West Arm, Lake Clark, and Merrill, MVFR is expected throughout Friday. Rainy Pass, MVFR conditions, as well as Windy Pass. Isabel Pass may become VFR by midday to afternoon, and then further east, Ventasta Pass starting out with VFR conditions, giving way to MVFR conditions midday Friday into Friday afternoon. Tanita Pass will generally see MVFR conditions hold on Friday, as will Portage Pass there along the northwestern Gulf. And then out over the far northern Panhandle, IFR conditions will persist in the Chilkoot and White Passes. Quick check of the freezing levels. They are highest across the Panhandle. We see the freezing levels aloft bump upwards of 2, 4, and 6,000 feet and exceeding 10,000 feet once you get off the British Columbia coast there through Vancouver Island and out into the northeast corner of the Pacific. Surface freezing line early Friday morning will extend up into areas of the southwest interior, Kuskokwim Basin, especially west of the Alaska Range. Threat of icing is isolated. Isolated moderate icing will be possible in areas of the Panhandle above 6,000 feet, extending back towards some scattered snow showers above 4,000 feet in areas of the southwest interior, and then out over the Bering, a cold pocket of air continues to pull back toward the south and west before modifying there to the southwest and west of St. Lawrence and St. Matthew, where icing above 1,000 feet and lower clouds will be possible. Upper level jet stream is most pronounced. We have an anticyclonically curved jet due to high pressure over the Pacific Northwest of the CONUS. Winds upwards of 135 knots over the southeast Alaskan interior as a result of that feature. At 9,000 feet, we have a low circulation generally to the northwest of St. Paul, and winds aloft are strongest coming into the northern Panhandle, northeastern Gulf Coast at 45 to 55 knots, bringing it down to 3,000 feet. We still find that low circulation there to the northwest, just to the northwest of St. Paul. Winds coming up into the northeastern Gulf Coast upwards of 40 knots, and then an area over far eastern Russia of 45 to 55 knots from the northeast. The greatest threat for turbulence on Friday will be over areas of the northeastern Gulf and along the outer coast there of the Panhandle, especially just to the south of Yakutat. Another area up over the Wrangell St. Elias Mountains and the eastern Alaska Range, as well as a broad area over eastern Russia, including the Gulf of Anadyr, surface to 4,000 feet.
Hi, this is Selena Van Breglen. I'm a hydrologist at the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and today I'm here to give you your 2023 Alaska Breakup Outlook. Breakup for the state of Alaska is running around 2 to 3 weeks late, and at this time we're just asking people to monitor conditions and prepare for breakup and the possibility of flooding. We're asking people to create a communication plan, both on your personal level with your friends and family, as well as on a community level. Asking you to prepare your family and pets, an emergency kit, prepare your home, be able to move belongings to higher ground, also be able to move your vehicles, and just to be prepared to be notified of possible flooding. So when we are looking at breakup, we are talking about breakup on the major interior rivers in the state of Alaska, the Yukon, the Kuskokwim, the Koyukuk, the Noaa, the major rivers which freeze multiple feet thick and have a large snowmelt pushed with them. When we are anticipating the probability of flooding, there are 3 main factors that we look at. The first is the snowpack, or the amount of snow which is accumulated over the winter. The second is the ice thickness, and with it, the strength. And then the third thing, and this is the most important thing, is the spring weather patterns, and most specifically, how warm we have gotten, how quickly. So the temperature in late April and early May. So looking at our past winter's snowpack, we have an above average snowpack in the state of Alaska, as well as the Yukon Basin. It does share some similarities with the April 2022 snowpack because those were both above normal. However, last year's snowpack was record-setting, whereas this year's snowpack is simply above normal. For example, the upper Yukon Basin is at 113% of normal compared with 160% of normal last year. The central Yukon is 122% compared to almost 200% of normal last year. And the Kuskokwim Basin is 150% based on limited data, which is very similar to how it was last year. Also, snowpack in the basins that drain the Kotzebue Sound are well above average, including the Kobuk and the Buckland River. As well, the Matanuska-Susitna Basin is mostly above average, with the exception of the Chulitna, west of the Parks Highway, with stations reporting below average snowpack. Also, some of the lower elevation sites, the YK Delta, South Central, as well as the North Slope, are all below normal. Then looking at this product, this is a model data of snow. So it is showing that we have above normal snowpack in the Alaska range, sort of the western Brooks Range, as well as the Seward Peninsula and into the upper Yukon as well. Ice conditions, ice conditions across the state are generally a little bit below normal to around average. There are a few notable exceptions, and these are places that the Weather Service is paying a special attention to throughout the breakup season. And these are locations which have abnormally thick ice. Those places are the upper Yukon between Eagle and Circle, where they had high freeze-up stages as well as fall freeze-up jams. The Buckland River also had a similar situation where they have a lot of thick ice. And there's also an ice jam that is between Kauskag and Aniak. So those, a handful of locations are places that have some pretty abnormal ice conditions and have a higher flood threat. Just wanted to remind everyone that the ice conditions are changing rapidly with the spring temperatures, and to always remember to think twice on ice and to be safe. Moving on towards temperatures, it's no surprise that it has been cold the month of April. These are temperatures which are departures from normal. You can see throughout the vast majority of the state that we have, between 20 to 15 degrees below normal, in the interior, over the Brooks Range, in southwest Alaska. So statewide, it has been a cold April. And what that means is that we still have not yet melted a lot of the snowpack that we would have melted by late April. And looking forward at our temperature outlook, we're expecting temperatures to remain below normal for sort of the southern half of the mainland through the second week of May. Looking at the village flood potential, we just wanted to highlight that due to the high snowpack as well as the later breakup, that statewide there's a greater likelihood of flooding on these major interior rivers, but particular attention should be paid to the communities of Buckland on the Buckland River, of Circle on the upper Yukon, and for Aniak and Kauskag on the Kuskokwim rivers. The breakup outlook as far as the timing is we are between 1 and 2 weeks late for the vast majority of the sites that we monitor. On the eastern half of the state, we're between 5 to 7 days late, and on the western half, we're roughly 6 to 9 days late. Where we are right now is across the state. Most of the rivers are very much frozen. We're starting to see a little bit of melting in the far reaches of the upper Yukon, but most of our sites are still well frozen. Just a little bit of a snapshot of current conditions around the state. Starting upstream of Alaska, the Yukon River at Dawson, where the Klondike River comes into the Yukon. Those conditions are still bright white, seeing very little melting so far. Then headed downstream to the Fresh Eyes on Ice camera at the Yukon River at Eagle, just across the border. Still seeing white ice, very, very no changes quite yet. Further downstream, the Tanana at Fairbanks, still a lot of very competent ice, also have a good bit of snow that's on the banks. And the Noaa Ice Classic, I've got a photo from what is current as well as a week ago, and you can see very little change either on the snowpack on the hillside or in the condition of the ice on the river. Some satellite images from the Kuskokwim River at Nikolai. This was taken on April 21st as the last cloud-free day. You can see that the ice is still very much intact and no signs of melting at this point. The Kuskokwim River at Sleepmute is also still intact. Very, very few signs of melting or moving. Earlier, I mentioned that we were concerned about an ice jam which was between Kalskag and Aniak. This is a satellite image taken from the middle of November where you can see that thick ice which is downstream of Lower Kalskag, which is going to be increasing the flood threat for Kalskag and Aniak. Squentna, just a little bit west of Anchorage, is starting to see some signs of melt on the satellite image. And then last but not least, the Copper River at Glenallen is starting to have a channel in the ice. So still, definitely behind schedule. So breakup is progressing, or at least it will be soon. We're waiting for the warmer temperatures. But in the meantime, please follow the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center on these links. There is the Alaska breakup map as well as the graphical breakup outlook. Thank you.
Don't be obtuse, stargazers. This week, Trace Dominguez will help you find 3 constellations thanks to 1 asterism. There's no special angle. All you have to do is try. Hit the darkness around 1 a.m. to look for Vega in the east. Vega is the brightest and bluest of the 3 stars that make up the summer triangle. Next is Altair, down and to the right of Vega. It shines with a stark white light, and then Deneb is up and to the left of Altair. It's the faintest of the 3. The summer triangle is an asterism, not a constellation. In fact, the 3 stars are part of 3 different constellations. Vega is the top right corner of Lyra the Harp, Altair is the neck of Aquila the Eagle, and Deneb is the tail of Cygnus the Swan. These constellations and the triangle are out every night all summer, so practice spotting it. Remember, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and we'll look at the sea ice edge before the marine forecast. Ice is extensive still throughout the Beaufort Sea down through the Chukchi Sea, though we do have plenty as opening up along the northwestern coastline from Utqiagvik to off of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. Also areas of ice opening up here, especially south of the Bering Strait and on the south side of St. Lawrence Island on up through northeastern areas of Norton Sound. Further south and west, the ice edge continues to melt off, despite we have some rather brisk northeast and north winds over the northern half of the Bering Sea associated with a late season batch of Arctic air that will moderate out over the Bering here as we go through the weekend, and we can expect the ice to continue to melt off and retreat gradually northward here in the days ahead. For the Panhandle, for marine weather, the inner channels, winds will be out of the southeast to east, 10 to 15 knots, waves generally 2 to 3 feet there for the inner channels, though 5-6 feet there, Dixon entrance south of Ketchikan. Outer coast winds will be southeasterly 15 to 20 knots with waves running 8 to 10 feet. On Saturday, winds turn northerly across Lynn Canal through Stevens Passage at 15 knots with waves a few feet. Still southeasterly, though, at Metlakatla and Ketchikan with waves of 4 to 5 feet, Dixon entrance. Areas for the nearshore waters off the outer coast will be generally east-northeast around 15 knots with waves of 6 to 7 feet. Across the northwestern Gulf, Cook Inlet, winds will be variable across northern Cook Inlet at 10 knots, but southeasterly to 20 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 4 to 5 feet. Prince William Sound, southeast winds 10 knots, waves a couple of feet, and off the Kenai, northeast winds 15 knots with waves of 5 to 6 feet. For Saturday, north winds within Prince William Sound at 10 knots and waves 2 feet. Winds across Cook Inlet will generally not be much over 10 knots. West to southwest up through the middle and upper Cook Inlet, but variable at 10 knots with waves a couple of feet there at the entrance of Cook Inlet. And then for areas of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds will be south-southeast 15 to 20 knots. Waves generally around 4 feet on the North Pacific side and 2 to 3 feet on the Bering side. For Saturday, winds variable, Shelikof Strait, 10 knots, waves 2 feet there, but otherwise winds across the Alaska Peninsula will be generally southeasterly, 20 to 25 knots, with waves 4 to 7 feet on the North Pacific side and 2 to 4 feet on the Bering side. Friday's marine forecast for the Aleutians: southwest winds 15 knots, eastern Aleutians, variable 10-knot winds around Atka and Adak, and then winds northeasterly 20 to as high as 30 knots there south of Shimia. And waves will generally be running 4 to 6 feet on the North Pacific side and 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side. For Saturday, low pressure will be well south of the central Aleutians. Ahead of it, though, winds try to go southerly, 20 knots, 20 to 25 knots there through the eastern Aleutians, turning back around to the northwest to 30 knots from Atka and Adak westward. Waves generally running anywhere from 11 to 16 feet on the North Pacific side and 6 to as high as 17 feet there, especially north of Atka and Adak. Along the southwest coast, we have southeasterly winds 15 to 20 knots over remnant ice. North winds 15 knots St. Matthew with waves of 7 feet. And then on Saturday, look for easterly winds out of Norton Sound off the YK deltas at 15 to 20 knots, turning east-northeast 25 knots there, St. Matthew down through St. Paul, with waves in those areas where you have our ice-free open waters waves upwards of 8 feet. And then along the Arctic coast, winds generally northeast 10 to 15 knots, increasing to 25 to 30 knots across the lower Chukchi Sea, especially off of Cape Lisburne, and north winds to 35 knots at Gamble there on the north side of St. Lawrence. And then for Saturday, winds generally out of the east, north of Point Lay all the way to Kaktovik at 15 to 20 knots. Look for easterly winds, lower Chukchi Sea 10 to 15 knots, but still holding upwards of 25 knots from the northeast on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. A quick check of the weather map. Later tonight, low pressure coming out of the North Pacific on up into the central Gulf. That feature will eventually pull up into the northwestern Gulf with warmer air riding up along the panhandle Saturday, getting temperatures back up into the 50s and 60s in the far southeast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.